it becomes more of a probability at that point. And those are the types of the things that people talk about, or that have a bunch of eyeballs that gravitate towards. Like if you're the best, if we have someone who's like, I want to be the best in the world at Twitter replies, and I can see it in their, bones, and like, this is all I've ever wanted to do, you should find a spot for them, because they're probably going to become the best in the world if you give them enough motivation, believe in them. And that creates this like incredible body of work.
Morning, y'all. This is Lindsay calling in from Laramie, Wyoming. I'm a psychotherapist and a volunteer ski patroller at our local hill. And I just want to say how much I enjoy the mud. I just deepened my relationship by signing up for the 90-day program. Coffee, which was my first love for many years, most of my life. I would give me the equivalent of meat sweats, which is not fun. So I'm enjoying not having the meat sweats with my mud, and also having this really nice steady stream of energy and focus and clarity throughout the day.
Lindsay, thank you so much for sending that in. Glad you're digging your mud. If anyone else wants to send a voice memo in, just bust out their phone, record less than a minute of audio, let us know who you are, where you're listening from, what it looks like, where you are right now. Email it to podcast@mudwtr.com, and if we play it, we will send you a free tin of mud. Please just include your name and address as you email podcast@mudwtr.com. What's up, everybody? My name is Kyle Thiermann, and welcome to the Trends with Benefits podcast. This episode wasn't even intended to be an episode at all until I got to the end of it and realized, damn, that was good. This was supposed to just be an interview that was going to be kept private. It's basically a meeting between the co-founder of Mudwater, Paul DeJoe, and me. And I was asking him a lot of questions about Mudwater's company culture and his philosophy on work. Mudwater is doing a lot of things differently in how they approach work, how they think about work, and I'm interested in writing about it. And then when we got to the end of the interview, I thought, damn, that was cool. Let's just release this in its full capacity. So that's why I wasn't using my handy-dandy microphone that you are listening to right now. I was just using my regular Apple AirPods. So I apologize that the audio on my end wasn't silky smooth and clean, but I think that you'll get through it. Some things that Paul didn't mention in this interview that I think are pretty cool are that every Mudwater employee gets an unlimited, I think basically unlimited book budget every month to support knowledge and a constant learning mindset. We also have access to a therapist to support our mental health and well-being. We get a stipend every year to go on a silent meditation retreat. And we're still inventing this whole thing. And Paul and Shane are kind of really the architects of this new way to work. And the way that I've been thinking about it is it's like Patagonia works to keep our environmental landscapes intact, and Mudwater is building a company that works to keep our mental landscapes intact. And all of these policies and philosophies are representations of that. So we're learning, we're growing, we're falling on our face, getting back up and figuring it out. And we want to share that journey with you as we are on it, because there's really no reason why we should all be working the same way that the status quo works. Work was different 100 years ago than it is today, and I guarantee you it's going to be a lot different 100 years from now. So why not be on the frontier of that change? That is what I believe, and love bringing everyone into this conversation with us as we are figuring it out. Paul DeJoe is the co-founder and chief operating officer at Mudwater, and this was my meeting with him that I didn't think I was going to publish, but now here we are. So please welcome to Trends with Benefits, Paul DeJoe. The first thing that I wanted to ask you about is the new implementation of the sprint cycle of 2 weeks of sprinting and 1 week of recovery, and where that idea came from and why you and Shane decided to implement it.
Yeah, so tons of credit to Shane on that one too. I think where the ideas come from that also makes Mud really fun is Shane and I, when we get together and we can't help but to work on things and collaborate. And when we're on vacations, we're not really on vacations. It's just time where we can get to work on the things we really want to work on for the company. It's also our hobby. And so a lot of what we do is coming from that stuff of what's really fun for us and what feels like a sustainable schedule that kind of follows how we like to work. So really intense, but then recognizing you got to really intensely take off too and chill. We really wanted this. We really love this idea of you have these Navy SEALs or NFL players that have these schedules where they're just subjecting themselves to such intense physical stimuli, but then they find they have to take days off. We're knowledge workers and we have to think about problems that get us from 0 to 1 or 1 million to 1 billion. Those are really fucking hard. They never turn off. And so, but you got to schedule in the time where it's okay to recognize, and it's okay for everybody to recognize that you should take time off and recharge your brain and think about other things. And that's when those ideas come. That's when you get motivation to work again. And we were running into a never ending stream of the next big problem. And it was until we get something on a schedule or a calendar that's company wide that you guys follow too and see that we're doing this too. We want to take this break. So you should, it wasn't going to work. We were going to keep running into the next big challenge. We're going to keep running into the next idea where you get started and you have 25 folders open and they were all getting done. They were just taking forever. And that's not really sustainable.
Right. I have noticed in my own writing, as feel like I've improved massively since taking this job, just due to volume that is required of me, that there's something really interesting that happens when I give myself a short time slot to write something, where I say, okay, I have the next 30 minutes to write this newsletter, or even 15 minutes. And often what will come out of that is just as good as if I gave myself 2 hours of sort of working. I think that there's something really powerful about that sprint and giving yourself a certain amount of time to finish a project that is really satisfying for the human brain. And I think that we don't get that when there's just this constant churning of work. We end up getting less done, just spending more time on it because you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel.
Yeah. There's no finite finish line there. It's all kind of a nebulous, amorphous, bleeding into other things. And there's nobody that's, I myself, I wasn't sharp on anything I was doing. I was getting stuff done at the beginning. That's fine. 80-20 is fine. But then you get into where you really need that last attention to detail, and you really need a succinct cutoff date when that is not perfect, but it gets shipped, right? I don't know if it was Disney or who coined the phrase, which was movies are never finished; they're just shipped, or whatever the fucking slang term is. We needed a date where something was getting done wherever it was at, and you didn't focus on anything else but that. So
I've heard you talk a lot about first principles. Can you define that?
Sure. It's like, it's the absolute base assumption. Like it's what we know is true. And so I like to say it a lot because it makes me sound smart, I think. And no, but it's like, it's really important that we use first principles in really defining the problem statement, and using the only time consensus really makes sense and where it's absolutely paramount is with the problem statement. So like, if you come to me with a problem statement, you're telling me from first principles why something happened, and we can't deduce that any further. And so we want to get to something that we can't deduce any further, because why that's so just absolutely critical on every problem we work on is, well, one, oftentimes it's unless you do that kind of analysis, you're probably not working on the real problem. And when you start putting resources towards the wrong problem and you pick the wrong vector, you can get momentum. You can go a while on working on the wrong problem. You build other products, you build other teams, you build other challenges and problems that are not the root problem. So, a lot of times these really big problems come down to like, oh, this one guy didn't make a phone call, or this one guy's not adding data, or, the challenger blew up because there was a failed safety inspection because the guy didn't get enough sleep or something, right? Like, that's why that happened. And you're really just trying to, I have to say first principles a lot, because when something's really important, you have to over communicate. And I really want everybody on the team that experiences a problem, which this is the default at a startup. You wake up and you deal with problems. And the next problem we have is how do we 10X ourselves? So it's like, we all need to be thinking on, okay, what's the problem statement right now? Do we agree on it? Then we can go towards that solution, but not before then.
So what are some examples of first principles that you've had to identify at Mudwater? Just some simple, real world examples.
So this happens a little bit with our like fulfillment company. They're a third party. You always have like an agency problem when you're dealing with these services, but they're still pretty great for what they do. And we just like recently launched this wholesale program. And a lot of times like these boxes where we're trying to create a really incredible first impression with these, an MGM Grand or, Erewhon or something, we want these boxes to show up in a way looks beautiful. And they're coming dented all the time. And it's like, what the hell's going on? And when you first kind of like seeing this a few times, like clearly what we thought was the issue is not the issue, because this keeps happening. So to really dig in and say, what's happening at a first principles level here. And it turns out that there's not enough permutations for box options for the 3PL to choose from. So they're forcing these really weird orders into only a few types of boxes that they have. And the people on the floor there, they have to move fast. So they're making a decision, and there's a lot of volume. So they're doing what they think is necessary and works, but it's really not. And so there we were like, okay, cool. We have to freeze, and we have to come up with, we have to simplify our ordering options for wholesale customers. And then we have to come up with the exact permutations of the boxes that we need so that these tins don't come dented. The first principles there is like, the people on the floor don't have the right options for boxes to choose from. And that's why these are coming dented. There's too much space, or there's not enough. So one example, but yeah.
I agree, man. It's so often that we're looking at the wrong problem, and the more experience that I have in life, the more I realize that you can sometimes nail it down to one specific thing. For example, I really appreciate the emphasis that Mudwater puts on sleep, because I think that often you could look at huge disasters that have happened and you can nail it down to one guy's lack of sleep the night before. In Matt Walker's book, he talks about how it was said that the Chernobyl disaster, there are rumors that it was the result of the crew not having enough sleep and being chronically sleep deprived, which makes humans more fallible. What was there a conversation or anything that kind of led to Mudwater's real focus on employees getting a lot of sleep?
I think we had the feeling before we could articulate it, and first principles applies there too, right? It's like, okay, this person made a mistake or something. It's like, well, are you rested? If you're not, then we know the propensity of mistakes has increased, right? So let's start there, right? Like, let's make sure everybody's getting rested. You've got the gnarliest, most intense problems that need to be solved in a short period of time, or absolutely need the most creative solutions to things, right? So that's why there's like a premium on that. But I think the origin of some things we really like at MUD were Shane and I working together before, and us both kind of like being in the remote situation and being like, hey, isn't this pretty great? Like, why isn't everybody doing this? And it was always like, there's still stigma on not pounding that 9 to 5 thing, or like having to work at certain times where it's like, why don't I work when I feel the most creative and unhurried? If I have to think about things that are really challenging. And so those were conversations we were having and feeling out at the last company we worked at, and it didn't work. But what survived was, if we could ever work together again, we would build a company that had this remote thing, that traveled together, that was like, you guys, like, we want you to sleep. We want you to have fun. We want people to get paid and get bonuses and all these things. And so it was never like really like, hey, what's our decision on sleep? I think that's probably a lot of the reason we have so much trouble communicating to the team on items, is that we've felt these things so organically for so long that it feels like obvious to us. It's like, oh, I have to step back and explain to you why I don't want you to show up to work if you haven't slept. Of course, like, someone's terribly abusing that because they're hammered every night. Like, my company loves when I do this. Like, that's not going to fly, but we don't have any challenges like that. So I think it was never like, whenever we talk in passing, it's like, we should do this. That sounds dope. Cool. It's, right. It's more the feelings that we've had forever that kind of get floated to the surface for ideas.
Sure. I notice a huge emphasis that you and Shane are putting on creating a company culture where people feel intrinsic motivation to carry out their projects. And can you talk about the problems that can occur at companies when people don't feel that, some of the traps that people will fall into, how that impacts, the founders and leadership, and kind of what it is that you're at, like the systems that you're putting in place to make it so that every team member, to a certain extent, feels like their own leader.
Yeah. I don't ever want to be in an environment or be a part of creating an environment where we're suppressing human nature. And when you get into, if you start like building these like reward systems that are built on the wrong things, which I would say, if I'm not helping you align with where you feel like you can really thrive, do your best work, and change something for the better or in a really material way for us in the world, then we've started off on the wrong first principles, I think. So it's just kind of like, if I can connect with you and say, what's the thing that you feel like you want to be the best in the world at, and I can see it and feel it, well, the chances are you're going, even if that's not in our roadmap, it's like the chances of you creating something that is so impactful and charismatic are so much, it becomes more of a probability at that point. And those are the types of the things that people talk about, or that have a bunch of eyeballs that gravitate towards. Like if you're the best, if we have someone who's like, I want to be the best in the world at Twitter replies, and I can see it in their, bones, and like, this is all I've ever wanted to do, you should find a spot for them, because they're probably going to become the best in the world if you give them enough motivation, believe in them. And that creates this like incredible body of work that attracts eyeballs, that attracts people that are looking for that type of quality or that type of attention to detail or whatever, because it's very difficult to find that in anything. Like, how often do you find the work of somebody who's in the best of the world at something? And when you do, you're just attracted to it. And that just creates a lot more opportunity for us. If someone comes in and is like, hey, I want to do this for Twitter, I'm like, we don't really need that. I need you to do this. They probably do an okay job or a pretty good job, but they're never going to get to that final 10%, in my opinion. And you're going to create these like disincentives. And if that's really not what we need, that's still cool, because I feel like we can really help that person achieve that. And I tell everyone on the team when they're joining, like, this is not your identity. This is not your life. I hope this is like one of the dopest stepping stones of your life at working at MUD or being with this team. And if you ever want to do something else or achieve something else or shift, I want to know that and be an agent of that. And that's kind of the agreement, like, I love having with everybody. There's no agency problems. You being the best in the world benefits me as a founder and a shareholder, and me getting you those resources or helping you align with what you really want to do benefits you as an individual growing. And I think if you create that ecosystem, the craziest shit starts to happen, and everybody's having fun and doing really great work. And the alternative to that, it sounds so fucking weird to me.
Okay. What is your philosophy on meetings?
I hate them so much that I've never developed a philosophy on them. I'll tell you the meetings I really love. They're just really organic. Like, we chatted yesterday on the phone and I was waiting for something and you called me. I was like, whoa, I would fucking love to talk to Kyle right now. I haven't talked to him in a while. And that was so enjoyable. And it wasn't on the books, right? But sometimes that's disruptive if you're in the zone. So I think the closest thing we got to a philosophy is kind of how we're thinking about the sprints and the blocking off of the creative time where you can focus on your thing and people know not to bother you then. I think meetings are really important if they're small, if they have like meeting notes and an agenda, and they really can't be in an email. Like, you need to get on the phone and collaborate, but the ones that I feel like you don't want to have in the future, or you don't want to have now, you're not going to want to have in the future. The ones that are important are, hey, this is a really intense topic and we need to debate it for a little bit. Those are really fun, but I don't have like quite a philosophy on it, other than I'm pretty sure that the ratio of meetings to execution is, 1 to 99. Even thinking through why a meeting needs to happen can also be like, oh, a meeting doesn't need to happen here. It's very convenient or easily accessible to be like, hey, can you jump on a call? Of course you can. And it feels like productivity. It feels like it's working, but that's not hooking up your homie or prepping them for success too. So.
Right. I think that time is a resource. So I've been thinking about this a lot, just in terms of where we allocate value, and much of the world allocates value to money for a number of reasons, right? Money is a resource that can give you choice, allows you to move laterally, in life, not need to worry as much about basic stuff. Another resource that people are beginning to value more is time. And the third that I think far less people are valuing and are just starting to come around to is the resource of attention. So by having a lot of meetings, you are taking up the first resource of money for the company, because meetings are extremely expensive. And I want you to talk about that. The second resource is the resource of time. If you do an hour-long meeting, that is taking up everyone's time who's a part of that meeting. And the third is attention. Personally, I have a really hard time getting into the groove of writing, taking a meeting, and then getting back to the same level or quality that I had before that attention was fractured. So it's really interesting how a meeting really touches on and impacts all three of those resources.
Yeah, it's when we're on a all hands, like the reason that those to me are actually not, I don't view those as expensive, is because what we hope happens on an all hands is we bring a human element back to our team. Like, it's not expensive for me to think about, we're meeting intentionally not to have a meeting. Like, this is for us to say hi, and we're a remote team and we don't want to check in and do gratitude. And that's actually, to me, less expensive than a one-on-one meeting that doesn't have an agenda with someone else on the team. There's real value in a meeting where we're trying to build and work on our relationships and show each other we care and see each other's faces, even though there's no agenda. What's really expensive is a leadership meeting or a department meeting where nobody has tackled why this is happening and has defined a clear objective, and we all agree that we need to solve these things, or we need to get on the first principles basis with the problem statement, and I need some help. And then we're going to go, try to think of some solutions on that call or come back. Like, a meeting where that's not happening is incredibly expensive. It's expensive for attention, it's expensive for money, and it's expensive because you haven't done anything. You've probably created a muscle memory of like fake productivity where another meeting that's useless will probably happen again.
Right. I really liked what you said about developing a habit of thinking through what actually needs to get accomplished on the meeting and if it even needs to happen. Right. Developing and thinking through what you were talking about regarding first principles and applying that even as a habit to calling meetings.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. We get to do these type of symbiotic relationships that we have here. They're really fun, and often business relationships are more rewarding and more fun because there's inherent rules that are self-evident. And like, if you go play basketball or hockey or whatever, rules are a technology. They allow you to interpret things much more quickly and allow you to establish a base of what we're doing here. And what's really fun about a business is that we know that we need to buy for one, sell for two, keep our employees. Like, you have a list of these things and you just really can't fuck up. And that helps a ton because it allows you to get to first principles thinking more quickly. Like, is this going to cost way more than the benefit is going to be? Or are we violating any of those principles? And if you kind of get those down, you can have fun within the parameters. Like, this can feel like a basketball game or pickup hockey game or something.
Right.
So yeah, like, meetings are a source of like, we're probably violating some of these first principles rules with business if we're not, these are not well thought out and there's a real need for them, or like we have if we don't have a plan for what we're trying to accomplish on here, then you're probably violating some first principles of business that They're very expensive.
So as Mudwater continues to grow, if it really does go from 1 million to 1 billion quickly, how do you plan to maintain this kind of startup culture where even people in junior positions can feel like they have ownership? And I'd like you to break down the way it works right now with with Notion and how you can create a Notion doc that you could surface to leadership if you think that it's something that the company should take priority over. Do you have any strategy for how you can maintain this culture if it gets to 1 billion quickly?
Yeah, so the startup culture goes from kind of like the feeling of like everybody gets to feel it on a macro scale when you're 10, 20, 30, maybe when you get into 50, it's a little bit harder, but the project brief is like experiencing it on a micro scale, and then pushing up, like it's like a bottoms up approach from feeling like a startup within your circle, in your crew, and then pushing that up to the rest of the team. So a project brief is kind of your own little startup. It's like, and the way we want to grow is we want everyone on the team to feel more like an artist than a cog. And your project brief is your canvas. And if we get to where we're going, the people on this team are really exceptional at project briefs. And that's hard to do. And it's going to be hard to become good at those, but it's worth it. And so when you're walking around and you're like, I'm on the Mudwater team, and you're walking around or you're on vacation or you're in the shower, and you can think like a startup founder where you're like, I've got an idea. And then the only thing in your way is how you lay that out in the project brief. And then how good are you at getting leadership to like say, fuck yeah, we need resources to go to that. And how good you are finding charisma or having enough charisma to get another teammate to help you on that. That's you becoming a leader of your own startup. And so you kind of create that cultural feel in the aggregate or individually throughout the company. Like it's still going to be scrappy. You're going to come up with an idea, nail it from, problem statement. You've recruited the team that needs to help you, and you've proven that there's a reason we should test this and here's the data and why we want to try it. That to me is like kind of the ultimate representation of what is beautiful about a startup is we're trying to create like everybody, like each person on the team should be kind of their own startup CEO within their project brief.
And can you define what a project brief actually looks like for anyone who might not understand that?
Sure. So back to this first principles thinking, where, this is why it's in our value statement, is like, you need to start with that. What is the problem, or what is the opportunity? Opportunity can be solving an existing problem, or often like the problem is we need a lot more customers way faster than something else, right? So there's an opportunity. So you want to start there with really getting it down to where it can't be deduced any further. So the problem statement is we need to increase retention by X because if we don't, here's our terminal growth. I'm getting in the nuance there, but that's really what it might sound like. And then you really want your teammate to look at that and verify or validate that that's actually true. And so we like to champion that. If I come to you with a problem statement, it's your job to tell me I'm an idiot. Like you get points for proving me wrong so that we don't start down that vector as a team. And then it becomes like Kyle validated it, or we need to go back to the drawing board. Imagine not getting that validated. It's not the right problem. You start pulling in resources like already. So that's why like fundamentally it has to start with the problem statement and getting that validation. Then you're just kind of looking for data to reinforce that's really what's happening. So you have access to all the data you want. Like there's got to be something a little bit further than an anecdotal element. You need something quantifiable or that we can look at and try to see how that works in the model. Then what you're looking for is, okay, who's involved with this project brief? Who else do I need? What is going to be their requirement? A lot of stuff goes through Adrian because he's our lead engineer, right? Back to what I was saying before, if you want to get Adrian excited, probably need to show him the impact of this data. And like, this is a big problem statement. Probably not going to get a non-material problem statement to get to execution stage if it's not big enough. So it encourages that kind of thinking. So, after the team that's involved or with that component of it, you're going to need their buy-in too, that they really understand it. And that can kind of happen on a kickoff call. So if we have a proposal or something, I might need to recruit those people that I think can be involved and then get their buy-in and show that I talked to these guys and they're in alignment and they can find the time and the bandwidth. And so that's an element of it. And then it gets approved. If it's good, the post-mortem is really important too. So we get that on the schedule when you're going to work on that, the timing that you need it, how much time you need. And then when it's done, we're going to want to look at that. Like, did we validate this assumption or this hypothesis? Did it get executed? What went well? What went wrong? And so that's arguably the most important after the problem statement, because that's where you're going to get better at creating these or understanding what didn't go well or what could have went more smoothly. And right now, like, they're going to be pretty ugly. We're just getting started. Some are really good. But those are the largest four elements of it.
Love it. If you could pick one thing, what impact would you like Mudwater to have on the world?
For me, it's very, I think Shane and my difference in personality types, I'm a very micro thinker, because I think a bottoms up approach is like the trickle or the drop in the ocean or the butterfly effect or have you, where if I think about the impact on the world, it's more like, what did every interaction I do with our team members lead to? Did I make them a better agent of positivity or change or independent thinking, having known me? And so I like to think about it more on a micro scale of like, if I do this in my backyard or on this call or when I pick up a phone, obviously sometimes I'm like an asshole and rushing or what have you, but I don't like that. But if I can do that with everyone on the team and inspire people individually, then I think what can be created for the world is exponential because of what those interactions can lead to. And those interactions lead to more interactions, but they lead to the thinking or the interactions that are in line with our values, which is why we spend time on that, like make the world a better place, et cetera. So I think the way to answer your question is like, if I can inspire, courage, curiosity, making the world a better place, or all of our values within each individual member of our team, what they can create is something that I think is something I couldn't quantify, or hope it's something I can't quantify. So I would hope that all our values become magnified by my interactions with the team. Shane is a brilliant macro thinker. So he thinks on like I don't want to butcher it because it's a really beautiful way he thinks. So don't hold me to this, but he would think more like, how do we galvanize a concert or a festival that is showing people, 10,000 people how to detox or sleep or get into breath work or work with maps on a global scale. Like that's how he thinks. And so we're a little different that way, but it's really cool that way.
Hey, it's Kyle again. Head over to trendswithbenefits.com and sign up for our newsletter to get weekly stories about psychedelics, adventure, well-being, and more. And if you dig this podcast, please leave a rating on Apple Podcasts. It takes less than 60 seconds and helps us book hard-to-get guests.